Travelling by car is convenient provided you've got somewhere to park. Travelling by car is convenient as long as you've got somewhere to park. But unless you have somewhere to park, travelling by car is just not an option in my country. Confused? Welcome to the wonderful world of conditionals, and welcome to the Word of Mouth English Studio channel, where we talk about all things grammar, accuracy, articulation, and help you with your speaking and writing performance. In today's video training session, we'll go through a handful of useful phrases or linking words or discourse markers that will help you navigate through the very confusing world of conditionals. Also, if the words unless, until, and till confuse you, as they confuse many of my B1, B2, and C1 users, then keep watching. Welcome to Conditionals. Let's get started. Today we're discussing conditionals. Now we know that conditionals are sentences or phrases divided into a total of two clauses, separated by words such as if, or when, or unless at some point. Some of these clauses might be more formal than others. If you're an English-speaking professional, you might already be familiar with expressions and clauses in contracts. When discussing terms and conditions, when discussing legal English, you might need to use conditionals, but in a more formal way, such as the one we'll look at below. In this contract, if you were to read the clause that I've just highlighted, would you be able to understand how the term provided that is used? And would you be able to understand its context or its meaning in context? Now, many of my B2 and C1 advanced English users still tend to make some errors with this kind of language, provided that. Whereas instead of using the word that, they might use the word than or when instead, and that is not appropriate, because provided that is the only discourse marker we should be using here, and it's a linker or a linking word or connector or connecting word, that means if, on condition that. So how do we go about using if? And what's the difference between using if and provided that in a structure? Also, have you ever come across these terms, provided that? Have you ever used English legally? Have you ever needed to use it to be able to write or read contracts and agreements? In NDAs, you will typically see clauses that look like this. They are more formal in structure, and they contain more appropriate and technical linkers. Let's have a look at some other very popular types of linker when discussing conditionals. If you take an umbrella, you'll stay dry. So here we used the word if, which is very similar to using if not or unless. However, if you do use unless or if not, then you'll have to change the sentence structure around a little. Unless you take your umbrella, you'll get wet. So these two sentences happen to mean exactly the same thing. As long as you take your umbrella, you'll stay dry. And provided that, or providing that you take an umbrella, you will remain dry. The word that is optional in this case, but it's used in more formal language if you'd like to write more complete sentences, perhaps. Then there's the expression only if, but be careful, don't get it confused with the term if only, which is also used to express unreal situations or hypothetical situations that go contrary to past reality or present reality. Only if you take an umbrella will you remain dry. So only if, in this case, is another way to say if you take an umbrella, you'll remain dry. Think about how often you have experimented with these types of linkers. Or do you always use the word if or when? How about whether or not? How often have you used this in your own speaking or writing? Whether or not you take an umbrella, you'll still get wet. The raging storm is unforgiving. So here, whether or not is used again as a conditional, and this is less formal. I would say it's informal to semi-formal. However, there are some more formal types of styles that we've already looked at, and that's provided that. On condition that, and provided that, or provided, or providing, or providing that, actually all mean the same thing and can be used in exactly the same way. They're all formal and appropriate for more academic or perhaps technical texts. Now in this section we'll move on to discuss two words that my B1 and B2 students usually have problems with. Detecting the difference between unless and until. So many of my intermediate users tell me that they don't see any difference between these two words and that they use them interchangeably. Can you? Well, the answer is no. Absolutely not. Don't use them interchangeably. The word until is used in the context of time, but not in the context of condition. And it roughly means before or up to a time. For instance, I cannot get to the TPS reports until next week. And I lived with my parents until I was 17. Until here is used to describe or discuss a time limitation and has nothing to do with condition and therefore can't be used in conditional clauses, like we've seen with the examples of linkers in the previous slide. The word unless, on the other hand, is used in the context of a precondition and means if this condition is not met. And let's just highlight that expression, let's underline it. Here are some examples of how unless is used now. I will not shoot that squirrel unless someone puts a gun to my head. If you were an animal lover, then you'd be likely to say something of the sort. And Peter will not go to the picnic unless his dog is allowed to accompany him is an expression that we use when we want to describe that there is a condition that accompanies the action we are currently giving or that we are currently expressing. So as you can see, the word until and unless are not used in the same way at all. So don't use the word until in conditional clauses until you have mastered both these expressions and can start using them appropriately. Now here are some more examples of how the words unless and until are used. The politician was afraid she would lose public support unless she expressed opposition to increased taxes. The city threatened to sue the factory for environmental pollution unless the company agreed to clean up the lake and install better filtration systems. Here we're clearly talking about a condition. The workers said they would continue to strike until the demands for a safer workplace were met. And here we're talking about time limitations, or a limitation that is roughly happening before a time and ends up finishing at a particular time. The party continued until the wee hours of the morning. So here we're talking about a time limitation again. So we're talking about duration from A till B. Paul refused to take a shower until the water heater was fixed. And again, time limitation from time period A to time period B. And the bank would repossess the car unless Neil made his loan payments. So therefore, unless is a condition in this case. You can use it in conditional clauses. Now, in this section, we'll look at a phrase that incorporates both the word unless and until in a phrase. Paul's mother told him that he will not get to play with any of his toys unless and until his homework was completed. So again, this is a fixed phrase. Keep in mind that the phrase unless and until is commonly used, and it often leads to people thinking that these two words would mean the same thing. However, this phrase should be used when the situation needs both a context of time, as well as a precondition. Let's have a look at a practical example in blue. Paul's mother told him that he will not get to play with any of his toys unless and until his homework is completed. So, in this example, completing the homework was the precondition. Here, are we talking about preconditions? Definitely. But think of it as a different type of condition, not as the, 0, first, second, or third, or mixed conditionals that we usually use. It doesn't have to be a technical word. This is not a technical phrase. It's actually used in semi-formal English and sometimes can be used in conversational or colloquial terms as well. But use it with caution, because unless and until do not mean the same thing in this case, and it's an entire phrase which is fixed and should be learned as a whole in a chunk. Try using this expression in sentences of your own. Thanks for watching today's tutorial. If you enjoyed the content and would like to see more of these videos, then hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. If you'd like me to discuss any particular English topics, then please leave a comment below. See you next time.